All right, three more words. Title. It's a noun. It's basically a document that shows that you own the property. It's a legal requirement for you to own property. And once everything's done with escrow, the title is recorded at the county. So if you guys wanted to and you owned property, you could look up your title and it would say, here's your name, here's the address, here's the number, well, I digress. But it's at the county. It shows that you own it. But before you can actually get title to a property, there has to be done what's called a title search. And this is a thing that you can do. You don't have to do it. It's done through escrow. And what they do is they have professionals and they check the county records to see who actually owns the property. Title searches are done by title insurance companies. You'll see that in a second. Once they determine that you have clear title, meaning that there's no weird ownership, there's no encumbrances, meaning somebody took out a lien on the property, somebody has a right to ownership, somebody who previously owned the property didn't pay the taxes. There's all kinds of reasons that it might not be a clean title. But once it's declared clean, that's when you can take ownership. So when you purchase a property, part of the escrow process is called title insurance. And these title insurance companies do the title search. And if they don't find any problems with the title, what they do is they issue another insurance policy. And that basically is insurance that in the unlikely event they did not find problems, but problems do exist with some ownership, maybe there was some person way in the past who owned something, who knows? There's all kinds of weird junk out there. That there's insurance to protect your and the lender's interest in the property. So it's not cheap. It's several $100s that you and the seller have to share. The buyer and the seller have to share equally usually. It is negotiable who pays for it. It's paid through escrow. But it's also for your peace of mind. You don't want someone coming along and taking your property because there wasn't good, clear title on it when you purchased it. Equity. Equity's a noun. Equity's a little hard to explain, but it's basically how much value you own in the property. So basically, if you took the value of the property and you subtracted how much you owe the lender for your mortgage, the leftover amount is your equity. Now, any appreciation in the value of the house, or the property rather, becomes equity. So if, my first house, I paid $124,000 for it. Yeah, I paid the mortgage. Yeah, I lived there for 20 years, but I sold it for $576,000. So I had a lot of equity in that puppy. So here's another example that's simpler. Let's say the property right now is worth $500,000. You have a $300,000 mortgage. That owner would have $2,000 in equity. Basically, if you sold the property and you put the money in your pocket, that's how much you'd end up with, kind of profit, I guess. Now, keep in mind, when you do sell a property, there are expenses incurred. So you wouldn't walk away with $200. You'd have to pay some expenses, but you'd still have some equity. Speaking of value of property, whenever there's a transaction like, a sale or whatever, an appraisal has to be done. And this is a professional person that comes in, and that's their job, is to professionally figure out the value of any property. And it is always required by lenders. When appraisers try to figure out the value of the property, it's not arbitrary. They use what's called comps, and comps stands for comparisons or comparables, same thing. Let's say you're in Buena Park, 3-bedroom, 2-bath condo, upstairs, fair condition, built in the 1970s, something like that. What they're going to do is they're going to look in the nearby areas for other properties that have those same configurations that have already sold, and they're going to use those as a basis to figure out the value of the property that's being appraised. Okay, so as you go through the escrow process, as you can imagine, there's a lot happening in escrow, and they don't go fast. A 30-day escrow from the time that you agree on a price between buyer and seller and the time when title transfers in and the new owner gets the keys and gets to move in. That's the time that the property is, quote, in escrow. Closing is the end of escrow. It can be used as a noun or a verb. 30 days is super fast. 60 days is kind of average. 90 is a little on the long side. Yes, there are longer and shorter ones, but they're very unusual. So it's not a fast process. There are a lot of costs associated with getting this whole transaction pulled off. The title insurance that I mentioned before, the escrow people need to be paid. The county needs to be paid. They don't want any delays, so they usually pay a courier to carry paperwork and so on around. The points that we discussed on the loan, that's part of the closing cost. You know, the appraiser has to get paid. The lender has to get paid. They do this stupid thing called loan origination fee, which pisses me off, but whatever. Once all of that is in the works, legally, escrow is required to give you something called a good faith estimate. This is their best estimate on every financial bit of the whole transaction summarized on one paper. It's going to include the payoff to the seller's mortgage company because, you know, most people, even though they're selling, they still owe money to the bank or the mortgage place. Any real estate commissions, if there's prorated property taxes, prorated interest that needs to happen, the principal PMI that we talked about, homeowners insurance premiums, loan payoffs, broker's fees. There's just a lot of fees, and all of this has to be disclosed legally. And this is the document that you want to use to ask questions like, why does this not line up with that? Why does that not match? And why is that more than what I was promised? You guys, here's the bottom line of all these transactions. It's all negotiable. It's all negotiable. Ask about fees that you see on here because you can question it, and sometimes they'll say, oh, okay, we'll waive that for you. And the worst they can do is say no, so it's worth asking. Oh, okay, that's it. Sorry it was a lot.